Hey guys, tonight we're taking a long, slow stroll back to ancient Mesopotamia. Think dusty sandals, temples made of mud brick, and more incense than a dorm room during finals week. You're standing in the city of Uruk, one of the oldest in the world, surrounded by strange sounds. A camel whining somewhere, a distant harp being plucked, the heavy breath of the desert just before nightfall. You squint up at a towering ziggurat, its steps winding into the sky like a staircase for the gods, and wonder why the air smells faintly herbal. You're not imagining things. Cannabis, or cunabu as it was once known, was right at home here, in ointments, offerings, and maybe even a cheeky puff behind the temple gardens. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop your location and local time in the comments. Let's see who else is drifting off in Babylon tonight. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge along a worn street, flattened by 1,000 years of sandaled feet. A potter passes you, balancing wares on his head. Somewhere, a child screams. Not in terror, just the usual shriek of a sibling who lost a game. This is Uruk, circa 2900 BCE, when scribes were still inventing how to complain in writing and the gods were very, very involved in your day-to-day bathing habits. And at the center of it all, the temple, towering over the city. Its many tiers draw priests and pilgrims alike. The scent of burning herbs wafts from its upper levels. You climb, slowly, as if your sandals are filled with lead. Or maybe it's just the warm sleepiness settling in. Inside the temple, you're greeted by murmurs and bells. A priest, face painted with mineral paste, dips a linen cloth into an oil mixture. The oil smells earthy, spicy, and faintly sweet. You recognize a hint of cannabis, crushed and infused with myrrh and date resin. It's not here for fun. It's sacred. The statue before you, gold-plated, imposing, is a god. Maybe Marduk or perhaps Ishtar. Historians still argue whether cannabis was applied only to gods of healing or across the pantheon. Either way, the priest isn't rushing. He rubs the oil into the statue's arms with practiced reverence, massaging divine joints like a celestial spa attendant. The reasoning? Well, back then, statues weren't decorations. They were considered actual embodiments of gods. By rubbing cannabis oil onto these divine forms, priests believed they were feeding, soothing, or empowering the gods, maybe even helping them relax after a long day of smiting and blessing. Your gaze drifts to a clay jar labeled in cuneiform, the ancient equivalent of "don't touch." It holds more of the sacred oil. Something cannabis was mixed with sesame or linseed oil, making it easier to spread and harder to burn. Others suggest it was burned anyway, gently, ceremonially, with the smoke rising to the heavens like a sleepy prayer. You step further into the chamber. It's dim, but not unpleasantly so. Candles flicker near small bowls of resin. A scribe sits in the corner, doodling what might be ritual instructions, or maybe just a drawing of a goat with really long legs. It's hard to tell. The stylus moves slowly, methodically. Outside, the city hums on. But here, in this temple haze, time thickens. You picture the scene from above. Incense curling around stone pillars, priests walking in slow loops, and somewhere in the back, a pot of oil warming over a small flame. You shift your weight. A low bench creaks. Behind the altar, another priest begins to chant. Not loudly, but rhythmically. The sound blends with the ambient noise. Footsteps, the wind through high windows, and the occasional hoot of a barn owl that's definitely not supposed to be inside. What's surprising is how ordinary this feels. Yes, it's ritual. Yes, it's sacred. But to the people of Uruk, this was just Tuesday. The use of cannabis in these rituals wasn't always recorded explicitly. Often, it's inferred from residue analysis, from the appearance of certain words in healing texts, from the stubborn belief that gods appreciated a good rubdown as much as the next divine entity. Scholars are still debating if every temple used cannabis, or if its use was limited to the south, where the plant grew more readily in the marshy banks of the Euphrates. There's also debate over pronunciation. Kunabu, Kunabu, Kanubu, the words blur depending on which tablet you're squinting at. One particularly sleepy theory suggests the word traveled with the plant, from Scythian traders to Assyrian botanists, eventually meandering into later Indo-European languages. But again, no consensus. You blink slowly, eyes tracing the gentle curve of a moonbeam falling across the stone floor. The ceremony concludes with a final offering. A bit of beer, a smear of honey, and a folded leaf placed at the base of the statue. The room falls quiet. Even the owl seems to respect the moment. Outside, the stars have begun their climb. The desert wind is cooler now. You descend the temple steps, each one worn smooth by time and tired feet. Back on the street, the scent of roasted goat mingles with wood smoke and dust. And you're just passing through. A sleepy witness to an ancient world where gods wore oil and priests carried little clay jars filled with strange-smelling secrets. You're still in Uruk. The city hasn't changed much, at least not yet. The morning sun is dragging its sleepy arms over the flat rooftops, and down in the temple courtyard, a familiar figure returns. A priest with a forehead tattoo of divine authority, arms stained with oil from yesterday's rituals. His pointed hat bobs slightly as he walks, stiff and serious, like someone who hasn't smiled since the invention of the wheel. This priest is part of the temple elite, a specialist in what might be the most soothing job title in history: oil handler. His actual responsibilities? Less glamorous. You watch as he sloshes around a bucket of cannabis-infused oil, carefully reheating it in a stone basin. It bubbles gently beside a clump of burning frankincense that smells suspiciously like your college roommate's dorm on a Sunday afternoon. Today's ritual? Refreshing the divine wardrobe. The statue of Ishtar, freshly rubbed and mildly radiant, is due for another oiling. You try not to giggle at the priest's frown as he dabs oil under the statue's armpits. This was serious work. Clean gods were happy gods, and happy gods were less likely to smite your goats with mysterious rashes. The priest hums, a low, repetitive tune that gets stuck in your head like an ancient earworm. He turns to you, or, well, through you, and begins explaining in a tone that suggests he's given this speech many times. The oil must be blended carefully. Cannabis for clarity, cypress for protection, and myrrh for divine sweetness. Not for ingestion, he mutters with a sharp look, though he's definitely had to say that to an intern before. The temples were known not just for their rituals, but for their surprisingly advanced cleanliness standards. Temple garments, laundered in basins with soapwort and occasionally scented oils. Floors were scrubbed with vinegar and sand. And the gods, rubbed, polished, and fluffed like spoiled pets. Some records suggest that even the statue's eyebrows were shaped with tiny bronze combs. Imagine being reincarnated as an eyebrow stylist for a golden thunder god. It's a living. You follow the priest behind the main altar, where small jars are arranged on low shelves. Each is marked with careful cuneiform labels. One reads, healing, another blessing, and a third, more cryptically, to still the spirits. Is the last one he opens. The scent is strong, earthy, and green with a sharp tang of fermented leaf. Cannabis was often prepared this way, infused into oil, possibly aged, and left to soak up the sun before being used in ceremonies. What makes it especially interesting is how cannabis was considered a purifier. Not a drug, not a vice, but a tool to draw out spiritual filth. When you live in a world full of demons, omens, and bad dreams caused by sneezing in the wrong direction, you'll try anything to keep your aura squeaky clean. There's debate among scholars whether the cannabis used in these oils had psychoactive effects. Some argue it was a low THC variety, grown more for fiber and ritual scent than for any real head change. Others suggest certain preparations, especially when burned in enclosed spaces, may have had a mind-altering side effect. Not enough to send you floating, but perhaps just enough to make divine whispers feel a little more convincing. As the priest finishes the anointing, he steps back, bows low, and whispers something to the floor. You can't quite make it out, but it sounds like thanks. Not to the god necessarily, but to the plant. Cannabis, after all, wasn't unique to Babylon. It had traveled, maybe not in neat labeled baskets, but via trade, seeds tucked in with barley or bundled in the skirts of wandering farmers. It moved from region to region, gathering new names, new meanings. To the Babylonians, it was kunabu. To someone in the hills of modern-day Iran, it might have been part of a healing paste or a trance ceremony. Back in the temple, the priest gathers his tools. He wipes the statue down with a cloth, soft, worn, and already oily from use. The cloth will be hung to dry in the courtyard, where pigeons aren't supposed to land, but inevitably do. That scent, cannabis, cypress, and smoke, will linger long after the ritual ends. You wander through the colonnade, feet brushing over scattered petals and bits of crushed date. A novice sweeps slowly, the broom barely disturbing the silence. He hums the same tune as the priest, but off-key. You pause to watch him, the broom making lazy circles across the stone floor. And now you find yourself wondering, what did the ancient Babylonians actually feel when these rituals were happening? Were they in awe? Were they just bored? Did they sneak a sniff of the oil when no one was watching? Historians still debate whether these rituals were universally understood, or if most people simply went through the motions. Did everyone believe the statue was alive? Or did some just nod along, thinking about lunch? The answer is probably yes and no, just like now. The day continues. The sun climbs higher. In the kitchens behind the temple, someone is baking flatbread. You can smell it yeasty and warm, with the faintest hint of sesame. It mixes with the smell of the oils, drifting lazily through the complex. The priest is gone now, off to prepare for the next ritual. The statue gleams faintly in the fading light, its bronze eyelids half closed as if already dreaming. You sit on the edge of a stone basin and close your eyes. The air is thick and slow like honey. Somewhere, someone strikes a bell. Once, twice. And the city exhales. The morning quiet of Uruk is fading, replaced by the familiar clatter of clay pots and the bickering of market vendors who seem to have been born mid-argument. You leave the temple behind and wander into the narrow alleys of the city's artisan quarter, where hemp fibers hang from drying racks like limp spaghetti and barefoot children chase goats that do not wish to be chased. Here, cannabis takes a different form, not as sacred oil or divine incense, but as rope, thread, and the occasional suspiciously sturdy sandal strap. The air smells of smoke and damp fiber. A weaver's apprentice walks by, his arms wrapped in a fine hemp twine, muttering about blisters and unreasonable quotas. You step aside to avoid a tangle of soaked stalks spread across the sun-warmed paving stones. Cannabis, in its non-intoxicating form, was a workhorse crop in Mesopotamia. Its stalks produced long, tough fibers that were surprisingly versatile. Clothes? Absolutely. Fishing nets? Check. Bowstrings, sacks, slings. Belts? All hemp, baby. And unlike wool, which had a habit of smelling like wet camel, hemp didn't hold odor. A small miracle in a world with minimal bathing and maximum sweat. One woman, seated under an awning, deftly braids hemp cord while rocking a baby with her foot. She doesn't look up, but you sense she's been doing this for decades. Her calloused fingers move in a rhythm older than the cuneiform tablets stored in the city archives. She dips the twine into a shallow bowl, likely some sort of plant glue, maybe resin from the cannabis plant itself, and pulls it through her hands to set the twist. Historians still debate whether the Babylonians made deliberate use of different cannabis strains, or if they simply took what grew well. It's unclear whether fiber plants and resin-heavy ones were cultivated separately at this time. But there's strong evidence the people here knew the difference between a plant that gave you rope and one that gave you visions. You pause beside a wall scrawled with graffiti. It's mostly trademarks and crude animal sketches, but one symbol stands out. A figure holding a stalk with 3 broad leaves. A sort of ancient we heart hemp, if you squint hard enough. Fringe scholars love to point to these as proof of a cannabis cult. Mainstream historians tend to roll their eyes. Still, there's no denying the plant's presence. You walk past a bundle of harvested stalks leaning against a doorway, their tops sticky with dried resin. A child sneaks up behind you, giggling as he tries to tie your robe with a bit of hemp thread. You step away with regal slowness. He bows dramatically, then runs off. I end the workshop ahead. The weaver's loom clacks softly. It's a huge frame made of wooden beams, probably dragged from the riverbank and lashed together with, you guessed it, hemp. The cloth being woven is coarse but durable, the kind of thing worn by farmers, laborers, and anyone who didn't rank high enough to get linen. You imagine the finished fabric. Stiff at first, then softening over time with wear and sweat. Not glamorous, but sturdy, like the people who wore it. Further along, you spot a man boiling hemp pulp in a stone cauldron. He's attempting to separate fibers, but mostly he's just covered in steam and cursing under his breath. His assistant hands him a small scoop of cannabis ash, possibly used as an additive or maybe just because the pot was sitting next to the temple incinerator. Either way, it goes in. The smell is, politely put, intense. It's not hard to see how a plant with this many uses could be viewed as sacred. Rope for boats, thread for robes, oil for gods, and smoke for, well, we'll get to that later. For now, it's enough to know that cannabis wasn't just a temple indulgence. It was baked into the bones of daily life. Even the city's sanitation workers, yes, they existed, used hemp brushes to sweep the sewer channels that wound beneath the outer courtyards. You walk along one now, careful not to step on the runoff. It gurgles in a less than relaxing way, but hey, everyone's got to do their part. And it's not just the adults who knew the plant. In schoolhouses, where young scribes in training practiced their wedge marks on soft clay tablets, cannabis ink, made from charred leaf powder and oil, was occasionally used to tint their tools. A fun side effect, their hands probably smelled like a very relaxed bonfire for weeks. You reach the edge of the artisan district as the sun tips toward its highest point. A cart rolls by, its wooden wheels creaking under a load of hemp sacks. One is labeled with a jagged mark, the symbol for temple stock. Special delivery, you assume, for divine polishing or perhaps the priest's secret stash of comfortable robes. You duck into a shaded alley, avoiding the worst of the noon heat. The scent of warm stone and wilted herbs lingers in the air. Somewhere, someone is singing in a language that's half prayer, half lullaby. And just before you drift off entirely, you notice a small tag hanging from a bundle of dried stalks beside a doorway. Written in clumsy cuneiform, "Strongest twine, temple approved." Of course it is. The sun has begun to lean westward, casting long shadows over the ziggurat of Uruk. Its stepped sides glow with heat, and at the top, a flag made of stiff hemp fabric flaps lazily in the breeze, as if even it can't be bothered to hurry today. You wander toward the base, pausing near a group of scholars squatting on mats under a canopy of stretched linen. Their clay tablets are spread out before them like the ancient version of a particularly dusty board meeting. The topic? Dreams, night visions, divine messages delivered via sleep. You linger nearby, pretending to admire the view, though no one seems to mind. Eavesdropping is practically encouraged when the gods are involved. Point one of the scribes, whose beard is more impressive than his posture, lifts a tablet and begins to read aloud. The dream in question involves a bull with 3 eyes, a floating tree, and a stream of honey turning into sand. He pauses for effect. Another scribe scratches his head. "Bad omen," he grunts. "Obviously." A third suggests that perhaps it's about taxes. Everyone groans. But dreams were no joke. In Mesopotamia, the night was a battleground of meaning. Dreams could be prophetic, diagnostic, or straight-up divine voicemail. And here's where cannabis sneaks back in, softly. Like incense smoke under a locked door, cannabis-infused oils weren't just for divine statues or rope-burned hands. They were also used, according to a few recovered tablets and later traditions, in rituals meant to clarify dreams. A little rubbed on the temples before sleep, a touch behind the ears. Not to sedate necessarily, but to loosen the mind so it might drift easier into the realm of gods and omens. Historians still argue whether these dream oils actually contained psychoactive cannabis, or if the belief in their power was enough to induce vivid night journeys. Either way, the association between the plant and prophetic sleep persisted. Some even claimed the gods preferred to speak to those who had properly prepared themselves, with oils, fasting, and the occasional song to lull the mind. A priest in training near you is nervously preparing for such a vision ritual. His teacher barks instructions. Rub gently, not like you're polishing a donkey hoof. The boy flinches and adjusts the cloth he's using to apply oil to his own forehead. You catch a whiff, herbal, resinous, with a faint sharpness that prickles your nose. He lies back on a mat, eyes fluttering shut, while the teacher begins to chant in a slow, droning rhythm. It's the kind of chant that sounds like it's been echoing through the ages, passed down like a lullaby with teeth. You sit quietly, the rhythm washing over you. Above, a hawk circles once, then disappears behind the ziggurat. You imagine the dream world this young priest might enter. Perhaps he'll find himself wandering a garden of fireflies, or floating above the Euphrates on a reed boat made of starlight. Or maybe he'll dream of paperwork. Even the gods had ledgers. Cannabis wasn't the only aid to dream-seeking, of course. The Babylonians also used poppy extracts, mandrake, and elaborate fasting. But cannabis was especially beloved for its dual nature, both practical and mystical, grounded and floating. Perfect for those hoping to bridge two worlds. One scribe records the dream the boy mutters as he sleeps. A white bird sits on a golden tablet. It sings with your mother's voice. The older scholars grunt approvingly. Someone jokes that the bird probably owes taxes. You stifle a yawn. This may be the most peaceful academic debate in recorded history. Later, the dreamer awakens, blinking slowly. His teacher hands him water and a small cube of date paste. "Eat," he says, "before your soul floats away entirely." The boy nods and eats. Nearby, a tablet lies on the mat, its soft clay surface still wet. The symbols carved into it translate roughly to "substance of the green plant, for clear sight in darkness." That's cannabis. Probably. Fringe scholars claim this is definitive proof of cannabis as a spiritual catalyst. Others suggest it might just be another herb. Still, the connection is hard to ignore. You move on, past the courtyard where older scribes now nap under a faded canopy. One snores gently, his head tilted at an angle that would cause most mortals permanent neck damage. His lap bears an open tablet inscribed with what appears to be someone else's dreams. A breeze stirs the air, and the hemp flag above rustles again, as if shaking off sleep. The scent of the ritual oil lingers, mingling with warm stone and distant river wind as you descend the ziggurat steps. You can almost feel it, the pull between waking and sleep, the thin veil that dreamers hope to lift. The idea that a plant, rubbed gently into skin or burned into air, could be a doorway. Well, it's not so far-fetched when you're standing in the shadow of gods. You find yourself yawning, not from boredom, but from the rhythm of the place. Even in a city humming with business and worship, there's space made for drifting minds. The rituals may be ancient, the oils faint and bitter, but the desire to understand dreams remains stubbornly human. And you begin to wonder, what would your own dream be tonight if you had the oil, the chant, and the mat under stars? Probably a goat, a floating library, and someone forgetting your name seems about right. Evening creeps across the rooftops of Uruk, and the city's colors soften into gold and shadow. Street vendors call out their final bargains. Children are ushered inside, and the temple grounds hush as the gods are offered their last prayers of the day. You move quietly now, the energy of the day ebbing like a tide, guiding you toward the private corners of domestic life, where cannabis plays its most underrated roles. You duck into a residential quarter, a tangle of mud brick homes with rooftop gardens and narrow alleys scented with cooking smoke. A dog barks half-heartedly.
Somewhere, lentil simmer in a clay pot.
It smells faintly of cumin and something a little sharper, hemp seed oil, maybe used for sautéing when animal fat is scarce or saved for feasts that are in one small home. A woman kneads dough on a stone slab while her mother grinds roasted hemp seeds with a pestle. The seeds, you note, smell nutty and rich, not unlike sunflower seeds roasted over a low flame. A bowl nearby holds a paste of mashed hemp seeds, garlic, and something that might be date syrup. It's the ancestor of a condiment, eaten with flatbread or used to flavor a simple soup. Fringe researchers suggest that cannabis may have been a protein staple for poorer families, especially when meat was a rare luxury. Hemp seeds are rich in nutrients, and grinding them into meal made them easier to digest. Though these preparations probably had no psychoactive effects, they added texture and taste to an otherwise bland grain-based diet. You're offered a piece of bread spread with the seed paste. It's earthy, slightly bitter, but strangely satisfying, like peanut butter that thinks it's a philosopher. Historians still debate how intentionally cannabis was cultivated for its food value. Was the Mesopotamian cook aware of the plant's nutritional properties? Or was it just another weed with seeds that didn't make you sick? Regardless, the practice endured. Hemp seed oil shows up in later Assyrian and Babylonian records as a cooking fat, sometimes reserved for temple meals, sometimes smeared on wounds. Versatile stuff, that little plant as you nibble the bread. A boy brings in an armful of stalks for the household loom. He drops them with a thud and wipes his nose on his sleeve. You follow him to the back, where a small room functions as a weaving nook, bedroom, and, judging by the smell, occasional goat refuge. The loom is primitive but clever. A few sticks lashed together, weights hanging to keep the threads taut. Hanging nearby are finished cloths, some coarse for work, others surprisingly soft. The mother gestures proudly. "Hemp for strength," she says, thumbing the edge. "Flax for show." You nod solemnly, as if you've always held such textile opinions. Later, the family gathers on the flat roof, sitting on woven mats to catch the evening breeze. Someone has lit a shallow bowl of smoldering herbs, mostly juniper from the smell, but there's a faint grassy note that could be cannabis. Not enough to intoxicate, just enough to soothe. The smoke curls lazily into the darkening sky. And then, story time. The grandmother begins with a voice worn smooth by decades. She tells of the god Enki gifting humans with plants to survive the great dry, grains, reeds, and the laughing plant, which grew near the river and whispered secrets to those who sat with it in silence. It could mend ropes, sweeten porridge, and calm the weeping baby. And if you burned it just right, it might show you the face of a god. Her tale is part myth, part memory, and part wishful cooking advice. But it captures a truth. Cannabis in this world isn't flashy. It's not a miracle or a menace. It's a background player, quietly useful, occasionally mysterious, and stubbornly everywhere. A few of the younger children nod off as the story winds down. One boy sleepily fingers a hemp cord tied around his wrist, a kind of charm against illness. Whether it works or not is unclear, but it gives his mother peace of mind. You lean back against the wall, eyes half-lidded, watching the stars emerge. A goat bleats once from the courtyard below, apparently unsatisfied with the evening's leftovers. The night is soft, humming with crickets and distant river wind. You realize that cannabis wasn't just a plant in ancient Mesopotamia. It was part of a rhythm, woven into fabric, simmered into stews, smeared on joints, and whispered about in bedtime stories. Nothing grand, just there, helping things along. And isn't that the best kind of history? The kind that doesn't shout, but lingers, like the scent of seed oil on bread, like a rope that never breaks, like a smoke that drifts upward, slow, steady, and just a little bit sleepy. Dawn filters back into the city like a guest returning too early to a party. A cock crows somewhere down the street, and a dog, predictably annoyed, barks in response. You're already awake, sort of lounging near the shadowed wall of a workshop, where the air still clings to last night's dreams and the musk of hemp oil. Today, you find yourself in the heart of Mesopotamian medicine. Not a grand temple clinic, but a small, clay-walled apothecary tucked behind the market square. The kind of place where every shelf groans under jars of dried roots, powders, and herbs labeled with scratches that look more like decoration than writing. You inhale. The smell is intense. Bitter, sweet, pungent, earthy, and vaguely suspicious. That a healer, or ASU, stands hunched over a table grinding a dark resin into paste. His robes are frayed but clean, his hands stained with the ghosts of 1,000 potions. Nearby, a younger assistant arranges bundles of dried plant stalks, hemp among them. The older man grunts approvingly when you glance toward the bundle. Strong fiber, stronger medicine, he mutters, holding up a tiny clay tablet. On it are instructions for a salve. Cannabis resin mixed with myrrh and crushed juniper. The dosage is approximate, the results uncertain. But for aching joints or stubborn humors of the foot, this little mixture is considered a staple. You run your hand along a table where empty vessels wait to be filled. One bears the faint imprint of a cuneiform symbol meaning quiet pain. a phrase that could double as Mesopotamian customer service philosophy. Historians still argue whether ancient cannabis preparations had potent enough levels of THC to genuinely dull pain or if placebo and ritual did most of the work. Some tablets describe it as a cooling agent, ideal for reducing inflammation and easing fever dreams. Others lump it in with obscure ingredients like crushed lizard tail or dirt from the left side of a temple pillar. Your mileage may vary. The healer demonstrates how to apply the resin, scooping it with a thin reed and smearing it along his own knuckles. Too much, he warns, and your tongue sleeps. You take that as both a medical insight and a poetic threat. Outside, a small line forms, older men with stiff shoulders, a young woman cradling a swollen ankle, and a man whose forehead shines with sweat despite the morning cool. The healer moves through them with practiced ease, listening, grunting, handing out powders wrapped in scraps of palm fiber or tiny glazed pots. Occasionally, a request comes in whispers. For dream smoke, or the sleeping leaf, or the green hush. These are euphemisms for stronger preparations, burned resins, inhaled vapors. The healer doesn't always fulfill these requests, but sometimes, for the right person or the right offering, he does. In the corner of the shop, a half-collapsed basket reveals an assortment of dried plants. One tag simply reads, Semu. Scholars suspect this was a general term for aromatic herbs, but in certain contexts it might have referred to cannabis, especially when paired with verbs like rub, burn, or inhale deeply, as with reverence or desperation. As the sun climbs higher, the healer takes a break, sipping from a small cup of barley beer. He waves you over and offers you a sip. It's warm, faintly sour, and probably not intended for enjoyment. For the liver, he says, then gestures to the bundle of hemp stalks. And for the muscles, he mimes pulling a heavy rope. You drink, then you lift. Indeed, hemp was often used to help workers recover from overexertion. Salves for strained backs, compresses for rope burns. A muscle oil recipe from an old tablet calls for cannabis, crushed fig seeds, and goose fat. Goose fat. You file that one under medicinal recipes that probably smell like regret. Fringe researchers suggest that cannabis may have also been used in early wound care, thanks to its antiseptic properties. A paste made from burnt hemp fibers mixed with vinegar and ash was sometimes applied to cuts or insect bites. Whether it helped or just stung horribly is another scholarly debate. By mid-morning, the healer is humming to himself as he stirs a thick mixture over a brazier. It smells like old socks and incense, probably a good sign in ancient Mesopotamian pharmacology. He dips a cloth in the brew and lays it across a young man's forehead. Fever, he explains. If he dreams of fish, he's getting better. If he dreams of cows, probably not. You nod, because at this point, why not? As you step out of the shop and back into the dusty sunlight, the street feels less chaotic, more human. Behind every shouting vendor or haggling farmer is someone who, at the end of the day, will rub aching shoulders with cannabis balm, sip bitter tea brewed from its seeds, or burn a resin cone in hopes of sleeping without dreams. Cannabis, in this corner of history, isn't dramatic. It's not a ritual centerpiece or a source of scandal. It's medicine, muddled, modest, and medicinal. An everyday comfort in a world where the gods are temperamental, the roads are dusty, and the furniture is almost entirely made of clay. You head toward the river, the smell of crushed hemp still clinging to your clothes, and wonder what your own doctor would say about goose fat and vinegar. Probably, please don't. By midday, the sun leans directly overhead, flattening shadows and urging every living creature to slow down. Even the donkeys, normally so enthusiastic about ignoring commands, have taken to standing still in the shade with expressions that suggest early retirement. You, naturally, are seeking a quieter corner, away from the shouts of vendors and the squeals of children chasing each other with alarming ceramic precision. You find sanctuary within the cool, high-walled precincts of a larger temple complex, one of Babylon's grander ones, dedicated to Ishtar. A few visitors mill about, reverent but curious, their sandals whispering on the polished mud brick floor. And tucked discreetly to one side, half in shadow, is the area you've come to see, the priestly workshop. Not the place of sacrifices or incense, but the humbler corner where oils are prepared, ointments stirred, and statues massaged. Yes, really. You're not sure what to expect exactly, but the moment you step in, your nostrils confirm you're in the right place. The scent is dense, like walking into a warm drawer filled with cedarwood, nutmeg, and something unmistakably green and slightly spicy. Cannabis, a priest wearing robes embroidered with tiny cuneiform prayers, turns toward you, palms slick with oil. He doesn't seem surprised to see you, which is either a good sign or just evidence that people show up here a lot looking dazed. He gestures for you to sit and begins speaking, not to you exactly, but more like to the room, or perhaps to the gods, who apparently appreciate a running commentary. The oil in question is thick and golden, steeped with a variety of herbs, cannabis chief among them. It's not meant for ingestion, but for anointing. And not just any object gets this honor. Only statues of gods, sacred relics, and occasionally the foreheads of newly initiated clergy. He carefully dips a cloth into the oil and approaches a statue of a lion-headed deity. The priest explains the ritual. Rubbing cannabis oil on statues wasn't just for shine or preservation. It was part of animating the object, giving the statue life through divine touch. The gods, apparently, appreciated a good skincare routine. Historians still debate how central cannabis was to these rituals. Some argue it was merely a fragrant base oil, valued for its consistency and ability to absorb other essences. Others believe it had symbolic importance, representing vitality, clarity, or even divine relaxation. After all, if you were a deity stuck in one pose for centuries, wouldn't you appreciate a gentle rub-down? You watch as he carefully traces the statue's shoulders, then its brow, murmuring prayers between each motion. The words are melodic, repetitive, and almost hypnotic. May your vision stretch across the winds. May your ears hear the sacred bell of reeds. May your limbs be soothed by green fire. Green fire. That's the phrase that catches your attention. It shows up in several Babylonian texts as a euphemism for cannabis oil. Whether for its color, the way it caught the light, or the warming sensation it caused when applied to the skin, no one is quite sure. But it sounds undeniably poetic. You imagine the god's bronze skin drinking it in, basking silently in eternal calm. The ritual continues, and now other priests have joined in. They work in synchrony, wiping, dabbing, bowing. Occasionally, they flick drops of oil toward the corners of the room or draw small symbols on the floor in what appears to be a paste of ash and powdered cannabis resin. The room smells sacred in that earthy, slightly smothering way that sacred places often do. One young initiate, clearly newer to the whole operation, accidentally knocks over a small bowl of oil. It spills silently across the floor, and everyone freezes for a moment. The supervising priest raises one eyebrow, then sighs. A hand signal is given, and the oil is respectfully absorbed into a cloth, which will later be buried in a ceremonial pit behind the temple. Nothing wasted, nothing desecrated. Even cannabis oil has its afterlife. Later, you're invited to help prepare a fresh batch. You're handed a mortar and a bundle of herbs, cannabis leaves, dried myrtle, a pinch of cinnamon bark. You grind them slowly, the sound echoing gently against the stone walls. The paste is added to warm sesame oil, stirred with a carved stick that's likely older than your entire family tree. As the oil warms, the aroma intensifies, and the priests begin humming softly. The sound is somewhere between a lullaby and a hymn. You find yourself swaying slightly, lulled by the rhythm, the scent, the light flickering on polished statues. For a brief moment, you understand what the ancients might have felt, that the gods were present, not as lightning bolts or stern voices from the sky, but as warmth in your chest and quiet in your thoughts. Cannabis in this world is no teenage rebellion or bohemian curiosity. It's holy, quietly, fragrantly holy. Its role is to soothe, to connect, to anoint, not to intoxicate, but to elevate. And if the gods ever did open their eyes from behind those stone lids, you imagine they'd nod approvingly and say, "Ah yes, the green fire, carry on." The priest hands you a small drop of the fresh oil on your palm. You rub it between your fingers, smooth, slightly sticky, warm. It smells like history. It smells like reverence. It smells relaxing. And then the bells sound, calling the faithful to prayer. The ritual ends. The statue glistens faintly in the light, and you step back into the courtyard feeling a little more divine than before. The afternoon air over Babylon hums like a plucked string, hot, taut, and vibrating with the sort of energy that says, you should really be napping right now. But instead, you find yourself strolling down a residential street, away from the grandeur of temples and oil-slicked gods, into the softer, quieter world of everyday life. Here, the houses are modest. Mud brick walls, shaded courtyards, woven reed doors that creak just enough to announce visitors but not so much as to embarrass them. Women carry baskets on their hips, boys chase each other with sticks, and somewhere, someone is always pounding something in a mortar. You pass a small garden, mostly onions and herbs, and catch the unmistakable whiff of hemp drying in the sun. It smells sharp, grassy, a little musky. It's the scent of utility, not mystery. Because while priests rubbed cannabis oil onto the limbs of gods, common folks were far more pragmatic about it. That a woman waves you over into her courtyard, where she and her daughter are twisting dried hemp fibers into cord. The motion is practiced, automatic. You try it, of course, and produce a length of twine that looks like something a nervous squirrel might have made. She laughs gently and sets your work aside, possibly to be burned later, and continues her own. Hemp was the duct tape of the ancient Mesopotamian home. Rope for pulling, string for binding, thread for weaving, even stuffing for sandals. Durable, water-resistant, and surprisingly easy to grow. And unlike flax or wool, it didn't demand much pampering. Just sun, water, and a reasonable amount of patience. You lean against the courtyard wall, watching as another neighbor walks by with a basket of hemp seeds. He's headed to a small community oven. Hemp seed cakes are on the menu today, flat, chewy discs flavored with honey and a bit of spice. They're not exactly gourmet, but they're packed with oil and protein, ideal for children, travelers, or anyone who just can't afford to faint halfway through a farming shift. You get a bite. It's crunchy, nutty, and dry enough to encourage a few generous gulps of watered-down beer. Definitely edible, possibly enjoyable. Historians still debate whether these were daily fare or seasonal novelties. One theory suggests they were made as offerings during festivals. Another argues they were a poor man's multivitamin. Back in the house, the daughter shows you a basket of dried leaves stored beside other herbs. She holds one up to her nose and inhales deeply before giggling. "For my uncle," she says. "For sleeping." It turns out many homes had some form of cannabis preparation stashed among the family remedies. A little bag of leaves for steeping, an old jar of oil for sore knees, even incense cones that, when burned, supposedly kept insects and nightmares away. You're not sure how scientifically accurate that last one is, but hey, ancient insomnia doesn't sound fun. Inside, the woman opens a clay jar and shows you a soft bomb that smells faintly of cannabis, pine resin, and goat fat. "For the old people," she says, rubbing a little on her wrist. The texture is a bit greasy, but the scent is oddly comforting. It smells like someone really tried. And in the world of home remedies, that's most of the battle. Fringe theories suggest some Babylonian households used cannabis for childbirth-related purposes, either as a poultice for easing labor pains or as a smoke used during recovery. The evidence is thin, fragmentary, and usually buried beneath centuries of dust and academic hedging. Still, when you consider the sheer practicality of these people, it wouldn't be surprising. If a plant was around and had any measurable effect, it found a use. You hear someone sneeze, and the woman excuses herself. When she returns, she has a bowl of crushed hemp seeds mixed with honey and date syrup, an impromptu remedy for seasonal sniffles. You try a spoonful. It's sweet, nutty, and vaguely medicinal in that your grandma swears by it, kind of way children nap in the shade, their faces sticky with leftover treats. An old man stretches on a mat using a rolled hemp cloth as a pillow. A cat snoozes in a pot that definitely wasn't designed for cat occupancy. The entire scene feels like a collective exhale. The pulse of Babylon is still there, beating softly beneath the woven mats and hand-thrown pottery. But for now, the world is at ease. You find yourself dozing off slightly, swayed by the rhythm of everyday motion, the creak of wood, the buzz of insects, the scent of herbs and oil and sun-warmed clay. It's not divine, not ceremonial. It's real. And somehow, that feels more sacred. In the quiet, you begin to understand cannabis not as an event, but as a presence. A quiet helper in kitchens, courtyards, and bedrooms. A balm, a thread, a seed. It's not mythic or forbidden. It's just there, woven into life, like the chords being twisted beside you. You stand, stretch, and thank the family. The woman presses a small twist of hemp cord into your hand. For dreams, she says. You don't ask whether she means sleeping dreams or life goals. Maybe in Babylon there wasn't such a big difference. You leave the quiet hum of domestic life behind and follow the trickle of water leading toward the city's fringes. Babylon's irrigation system is its lifeblood. Canals and ditches threading through neighborhoods like pulsing veins, feeding everything from wheat to pomegranate trees. And along these calm waterways, where reeds sway like lazy metronomes, you find the gardens. Not the grand palace gardens. Those are for impressing foreign dignitaries and throwing shade at rivals who don't have a functioning waterfall. No, these are the community plots, tucked between homes and the slow-moving canals, cultivated with care and just enough neighborly rivalry to keep things interesting. Your feet crunch over gravel as you approach one such garden, hemmed in by low stone borders and shaded by a lattice of woven reeds. A few locals nod in greeting, but mostly they're focused, eyes squinting at sprouting rows, hands dusted with soil. And in the far corner, among bunches of coriander, a small, well-tended patch of cannabis. The gardener sees you looking and gives a little wave, clearly proud. She gestures you over and kneels beside the plants, her hands moving with the practiced ease of someone who's pulled more weeds than you've had breakfasts. The cannabis here isn't towering or wild. It's neat, compact, subtly fragrant, grown not for grand rituals or export, but for thread, oil, and yes, the occasional medicinal puff. She plucks a leaf and crushes it gently between her fingers, releasing a scent that dances between peppery and citrusy. Keeps the worms away, she says, waving a hand toward the cucumbers nearby. Whether it's true or not, the cucumbers seem quite content, reclining in the shade like green aristocrats on holiday. Historians still argue whether cannabis was deliberately rotated in Babylonian agriculture or simply tolerated as a useful volunteer crop. One that springs up on its own and earns its keep by being more helpful than invasive. Some tablets list it alongside other common herbs. Others ignore it entirely. Babylonian bureaucrats were apparently less interested in your hemp patch than in your barley quotas. You sit beside the gardener, who offers you a simple reed basket to help with sorting seeds. The slow work, methodical pluck, pinch, drop, the kind of task that lulls the mind, perfect for mulling over the mysteries of crop rotation or wondering what kind of sandals the gods might prefer. She speaks softly as she works. Her grandfather, she says, swore by a nightly tea brewed with cannabis leaves and chamomile, helped with his joints, his digestion, and his storytelling. You raise an eyebrow at that last one, especially the ones about flying sheep, she adds with a wink. You both chuckle, but the implication is clear. Cannabis was more than a plant. It was part of memory, of oral tradition, of the soft tissue between generations, passed down not with ceremony, but with a shrug and a spoonful of honey. Nearby, a teenage boy sets up a small reed basket trap in the canal, hoping to catch fish for dinner. He pauses, sniffing the air. Is she making the sleep bomb again? He asks, nose wrinkling. Smells like my uncle's socks. The gardener huffs and flicks a clump of soil in his direction. You suspect this is a long-running familial debate point. One of the more intriguing uses of cannabis in Babylonian gardens involved its ashes. After burning the stalks, once the useful parts had been stripped, the resulting ash was often scattered over soil as a rudimentary fertilizer. High in potassium and carbon, it was thought to enrich the ground, especially in spots prone to sourness or salt buildup. Whether scientifically effective or just enthusiastically smoky, the practice stuck around for centuries. You glance at a nearby wall where a row of flattened clay tiles has been set to dry. Embedded in one is a single cannabis seed, likely dropped by accident, but now immortalized like a bug in amber. It's a small reminder that agriculture leaves echoes, even in unintended ways, that as the sun begins to mellow, casting long gold fingers across the rows, The gardener wipes her hands and pulls out a small cloth pouch. Inside are dried buds, dark and resinous, meant for later use. She explains that these will be gently toasted over a small flame and crumbled into an oil-based salve. Good for headaches, bad moods, and occasional marital squabbles. You can't help but marvel at how seamlessly cannabis fits into this world. Not exalted, not forbidden, just part of the toolkit. Like clay, or date syrup, or that one cousin who's always around even if no one remembers inviting him. The boy returns with 2 tiny fish and a triumphant grin. Dinner is settled. You thank the gardener and rise to leave, brushing soil from your knees and accepting a small packet of seeds for travel luck. As you walk back toward the city, the breeze picks up, rustling the reeds and carrying with it the scent of warm earth, crushed leaves, and possibility. The gardens shrink behind you, blending into the fabric of Babylon. But their quiet logic lingers that I end this world. Cannabis isn't an argument. It's a helper, a quiet co-star in the daily show of getting by. And sometimes that's all you really need. You drift along a side path now, feet tracing the cracks between well-worn cobblestones, toward the pulse of something a little louder, a little livelier than the quiet domestic gardens you've just left. The air hums with talk, with haggling, with the occasional goat bleating in protest. You've arrived at the bazaar. This isn't the giant, mythic kind of marketplace with 20 elephants and a prince offering rubies from a velvet pouch. This is a messy, honest sprawl of stalls, smells, and the strange dance of daily commerce. Here, Babylon breathes. And cannabis? Yes, it's here too. If you know where to look, you sidestep a man selling garlands of dried herbs, each one bundled tightly with string and boasting a hand-scrawled clay token describing its virtues. Chamomile for dreaming, anise for breath, and one rather modest packet simply labeled Plant of Ishtar. That's the cannabis. Sort of a wink, sort of a euphemism, sort of a don't ask too many questions situation. You pick it up, pretending to sniff it like a seasoned herbalist, but it mostly smells like a sun-baked haystack with a little extra mystery. The vendor leans closer and mutters, "Good for back pain, better for marriage," then raises his eyebrows twice, in a move so dramatic it should be illegal. You thank him and move on, unsure if that was a joke or a threat. A few stalls down, an older man is selling small ceramic pipes, just a few inches long, glazed in blue and brown. He claims they're for myrrh and holy smoke, but you note the faint black residue in a few well-loved samples. Historians still debate whether these kinds of pipes were for ritual incense or personal use, or, as is usually the case in human history, both. You pick one up, noting the delicate etching of a lion chasing a star. Stylish and vague, perfect for plausible deniability. Another stand. A woman fans herself lazily beside jars of infused oil. Each one promises some vaguely miraculous outcome. Shinier hair, smoother skin, calmer dreams. You spot one with a faint green tint and ask, innocently, what's inside? She shrugs. Leaves, she says. Many kinds. And she winks. Why does everyone in Babylon wink so much? A younger customer beside you nudges your elbow. Rub that stuff on your temples, he whispers. Makes you forget your debts. You're not sure if that's a testimonial or a philosophical statement. As you wander deeper into the market, the sun tilts lower, and the smells get denser. Baked bread, crushed herbs, occasional whiffs of animals doing exactly what you'd expect animals to do. Amid the chaos, a stall catches your eye. It's half shaded by a fluttering sheet and stacked with tablets. Clay tablets, some old and cracked, others freshly made. The vendor, an unusually clean man with ink-stained fingers, explains that he copies medicinal recipes from temple archives and sells them to healers, scribes, and very bored people with too much silver. He flips through a few examples. One includes cannabis in a salve for bruised ribs. Another recommends cannabis seeds crushed with sesame oil for clearing the chest and dissuading intrusive thoughts, which sounds suspiciously like Babylonian speak for calm down, Greg. Historians still argue whether these prescriptions were common or niche, but their mere existence suggests cannabis wasn't considered outrageous, just helpful sometimes. You buy a small copy for yourself. It's warm from the sun and smells faintly of baked clay. The script is tight and elegant, but there's a smear in the corner. Perhaps someone sneezed mid-manuscript. It makes it feel personal. As the day stretches into its golden hour, vendors begin packing up. Chickens are reboxed, spices are covered, and a child collects the stray clay tokens that haven't been redeemed. You sit near a well and sip a mildly fermented drink that tastes like sour apples and hope. A nearby musician plucks a stringed instrument lazily, sending gentle notes into the warm air. You reflect on what you've seen. Cannabis as a spice, a balm, a bargaining chip. Not a marvel, not a miracle, just a thing among things. Traded with the same energy as garlic bulbs or sandalwood. Folded into daily life like a long-running subplot. And yet, there's a quiet reverence too. A knowledge passed from hand to hand, smuggled in winks and muttered advice. Rub it here, burn it there. Don't use too much unless it's a festival. It lives between the stalls, beneath the price tags, beside the stories as you rise to leave. The pipe vendor calls after you. Come back tomorrow. I'll have one shaped like a lion. You promise you will, though you're not sure if he's serious. Then again, in Babylon, everything seems half serious, half practical, half poetic. You walk back through the market's fading shadows, a little pouch of seeds bouncing against your side and a suspiciously well-wrapped oil bottle tucked under your arm. Above you, the sky deepens to violet, and you realize you haven't thought about time for hours. That's the thing about marketplaces. They pretend to be about goods and silver, but really they're about people. And the people of Babylon, in their sunburned wisdom, found ways to make even something like cannabis ordinary, useful, kind. You sigh, contentedly full of warm air, stranger wisdom, and questionable oil. And you suspect that tonight, your dreams might be shaped just a little by clay tablets, blue-glazed pipes, and vendors who speak in riddles. As the market fades behind you, your path twists toward a quieter corner of Babylon, a place less talked about in stories, but no less essential. Here lie the workshops and apothecaries, where magic and medicine blur, and where cannabis, in all its humble greenery, finds new life through the hands of the city's most eccentric characters. You approach a narrow doorway tucked between two stone buildings, marked with a symbol that looks suspiciously like a goat doing yoga. This is, apparently, the sign for one of the city's best-known apothecaries. A place where ailments are soothed, curses are questioned, and nobody really checks if the labels are spelled correctly. Inside, the air is dense with the scent of oils, ash, and ambition. Clay jars line every wall, each marked with a different scribble, some clear, some looking like someone sneezed mid-carving. One shelf is devoted entirely to dried plant matter, including a jar labeled cuneiform, the Akkadian word many scholars agree refers to cannabis. Your nose twitches as you lean closer. The herb is darker than what you saw in the garden, dried, ground fine, mixed perhaps with something else. The apothecary, a tall woman with streaks of charcoal on her face, notices your interest. Not for smoking, she says immediately. For dreams. She taps a small stone burner where a few flakes of the blend rest on a gently glowing coal. The smoke curls upward like a shy dancer, thin and sweet. She waves her hand and gestures for you to inhale. Not too deeply. You do, and the scent is unlike anything else. Earthy, citrusy, and ever so slightly peppery. It doesn't knock you over, just nudges you in the direction of maybe sitting down for a while. Historians still argue whether this type of use was spiritual, medicinal, or simply recreational. The truth, as always, seems to be all three at once. In Babylon, there wasn't a hard line between the healer and the priest, the ritual and the remedy. You needed a good night's sleep? You called the same person you called when you suspected your neighbor's goat was cursing your lentils. The apothecary shows you a tablet, an older one, cracked and darkened by age. It lists ingredients for a salve meant to relieve the heaviness of mind and chest, and cannabis appears alongside ingredients like myrrh, thyme, and something called stone oil, which might be mineral oil or just a really poetic way to say whatever was lying around. She explains, in a tone that's equal parts instructor and gossip, that cannabis oil was often massaged into joints, temples, even bellies. Not for euphoria, but for relief, for that long exhale that says, "Ah, I can survive this day after all." One corner of the shop is more experimental. You find odd blends, one labeled for arguing husbands, another for remembering dreams, and yet another simply called 4 Tuesdays. You're tempted to ask what's in it, but then you remember that sometimes mystery is half the medicine. On a low shelf rests a series of animal-shaped pots. Each one's belly holds a different herbal concoction. The dog contains a mixture for easing sleep, the lion for courage, and the owl, of course, for vivid dreams. You ask about the cat. She's for curiosity, the apothecary smirks. Mostly a placebo. A younger assistant darts in with a new delivery. A bundle of fresh cannabis, still sticky with resin, wrapped in a palm leaf. It's weighed, sniffed, and judged with a level of seriousness usually reserved for diamonds or choosing which wine to pair with mutton. The apothecary declares it acceptable, then nods to you. You want to help grind it? You do. The mortar is smooth, the pestle heavy. You settle into the rhythm. Press, twist, lift, repeat, while she hums a song that might be a lullaby or a warning. The texture changes slowly, the scent deepens, and your hands begin to smell like old forests and new possibilities. She shows you how to mix it with warm sesame oil, how to strain the result through fine linen, how to whisper to it if you're superstitious. It listens, she adds, not entirely joking as you bottle your small portion. She offers a final tip: never mix it with goat's milk. You'll see too much. Whether she means hallucinations or just your own regrets is unclear. Stepping back into the street, you feel calmer, grounded, like someone's added an invisible cushion to the soles of your sandals. The workshop hums behind you, a place where science and sorcery play cards by candlelight. And now you realize, in Babylon, cannabis wasn't loud. It didn't shout or demand a temple of its own. It was a whisper in a jar, a sigh in a salve, a quiet nod passed from hand to hand. You clutch your new oil gently, tucking it into your satchel like a secret. The sky above has deepened to a color somewhere between plum and sleep. Lamps flicker to life, their flames catching on tiny bronze reflectors, casting warm halos on the walls, and as you head home, wherever that might be, you feel oddly at ease, like perhaps, just perhaps, you'll sleep better tonight. The city is quieter now. Babylon, grand and buzzing by day, dims into something more private at night. Quieter courtyards, lower voices, laughter wrapped in the hush of shadows. You wind through alleys that smell of dust and old incense, the stones still warm beneath your feet. Crickets begin their steady chirp. Like nature's attempt at polite applause, you've got a destination in mind. A priest's house, though house might be generous. It's a sprawling series of interconnected chambers, part temple, part residence, part classroom. This is where junior clergy live and study, and where, tonight, you've been invited to witness something quietly unusual. The door opens with the faintest creak. Inside, a lamp burns low and golden. The air smells faintly of saffron, sandalwood, and something else. Something green. Your host, a middle-aged priest with a shaved head and the kind of eyebrows that suggest he's seen things, nods in welcome. He speaks little, preferring gestures. A hand offered toward a woven mat. A glance toward a shallow bowl resting near the flame. Inside the bowl is an oil thick, glistening, tinted with something dark. Beside it, a bundle of fibers, like yarn soaked in ash and sunlight. You recognize the scent now. Cannabis, yes, but infused, blended, and enhanced. Not meant for eating, not meant for smoking, for rubbing. He takes the mixture with practiced care and begins to anoint a small stone figurine sitting on an altar. It's the goddess Ishtar, or at least a version of her. You recognize the exaggerated curves, the lion's feet, the mysterious half-smile. The oil is spread in a circular motion, over the shoulders, along the arms, across the brow. Like washing a face that never blinks. You've read about this, or at least heard the whispers. In Babylon, sacred statues weren't just stone. They were living stand-ins, avatars of the gods. And gods, like guests or kings, needed tending. Cleaned, dressed, perfumed, sometimes fed, and, as it turns out, occasionally massaged with a very particular herbal blend. Historians still argue whether these rituals were symbolic or if people truly believed the statue absorbed the properties of what touched it. Either way, the priests took no chances. The oil, often infused with cannabis, was meant to invite clarity, blessing, or perhaps just cooperation. If your deity happened to be especially moody, a little massage never hurt. As the priest works, he hums a tune older than the walls. It's not exactly melodic, more of a chant with rhythm but no clear beginning or end. You catch a word or two: light, sleep, peace. The rest is mystery, and that feels appropriate. You're invited to try. You approach the statue, your hands trembling slightly, not from fear, exactly, but from the sheer weirdness of the moment. You dip your fingers in the oil. It's warm, thick, and unexpectedly sticky. You rub it gently along the side of the stone arm. The surface is cool, smooth, but pitted from centuries of attention. You imagine all the others who've done this: priests, novices, the occasional overly curious goat herder sneaking into the wrong room. There's something calming about it. You're not sure if it's the scent, the motion, or the quiet acknowledgement of participating in a ritual so old it forgets its own age. But in this moment, it feels right. The priest nods approvingly, then sprinkles a few drops of water over the statue's head. The oil hisses faintly, releasing a new wave of scent: earth, citrus, memory. Later, seated on a low stool, the priest offers you a cup of something brewed. It's bitter, grassy, with a faint aftertaste of roasted seeds. You sip politely, trying not to grimace. It's cannabis-based, he explains, though not strong. Just enough, he says, to make sleep honest. He tells you stories, short ones, between sips. One about a scribe who anointed his pen with cannabis oil and claimed it improved his handwriting. One about a woman who insisted that rubbing the oil on her eyelids helped her see into dreams. And one, half-laughed, about a goat who ate an entire jar and spent 3 days convinced he was a camel. You ask if the rituals worked, if the gods really noticed the oil, the care, the effort. The priest shrugs. They never complain, he says, and sometimes that's enough. You leave the temple house in a daze. The stars have appeared, bold and clear, scattered like a spilled jar of lentils across the sky. The breeze carries a hint of wood smoke and fig trees. You feel slow, warm, and just a little surreal. Cannabis here is not rebellion. It's not escape. It's part of the architecture of belief, woven into routines and sacred gestures, rubbed gently onto the foreheads of statues that never speak but somehow listen. You walk back through the sleeping city, every step softer than the last. Somewhere, a cat yowls at a shadow. Somewhere else, a child laughs in their dreams. And in your pocket, the scent of the oil lingers, stubborn and ancient, like a lullaby in resin form. You wake, though not fully. It's that middle-of-the-night lucidity, the kind that feels like floating in a warm bowl of soup. The city is quieter now, deeper into its slumber, and yet, there are still corners stirring with life, with dreams, with secrets that refuse to sleep. Tonight, you've been invited to observe something more personal, less ritual, more routine. A Babylonian household. Not royalty, not priests, just a modest family in the district of artisans. Potters, to be exact. People who shape clay for a living and seem, somehow, more grounded because of it. You arrive at the house just as the moon crests the edge of a mud brick rooftop. The father welcomes you with a quiet nod. He has strong hands and soft eyes. The mother, wearing a wrap stained with powdered ochre, smiles tiredly. She gestures to a mat near a brazier. The children are already asleep, bundled like scrolls, toes peeking from linen wraps. One of them snores faintly in rhythm with the crackle of the coals. The mother opens a wooden box, revealing a small cloth bundle. She unwraps it to show crushed leaves, cannabis, mixed with lavender and something sweet, maybe fig resin or honey bark. She sprinkles a pinch into a clay burner, then adds a glowing coal with practiced ease. A light smoke begins to drift. It doesn't fill the room, exactly. More like it soaks in, nestling into corners and clothing. The scent is calming, floral and green, like a sleepy garden after rain. This, she explains, is for my bones. She rubs her lower back, wincing. And this, she adds, pointing to the smoke, is for forgetting my neighbor's voice, Her husband chuckles, but softly, like a man who's learned not to poke certain bears after sundown. They offer you a small ceramic cup of tisane, warm water steeped with cannabis seeds and fennel. The seeds are toasted first, which gives the drink a nutty depth. It's faintly bitter but oddly pleasant, like drinking a cozy argument. You sip, and the warmth spreads slowly. Not dramatic, not instant, just steady. Your shoulders let go of a few things they were carrying. The father pulls out a salve. It's thick, dark, with a sheen that glows in the firelight. He massages it into his wrists while the mother does the same to her knees. No incense, no prayers, just quiet care after a long day shaping pots and shushing children. Historians still debate how common cannabis use was among Babylon's working class. Some believe it was reserved for priests and physicians. Others argue it was more widespread, used by anyone with access and knowledge. In this house, at least, the answer is clear. It's part of the evening, like sweeping the floor or whispering to your cat not to knock over the lamp. The couple speaks in low tones. They talk about the market, about a cracked kiln, about whether or not to let their eldest apprentice under another potter. Nothing dramatic, nothing urgent, just life, and the cannabis, subtle and silent, seems to smooth the edges of their fatigue. The wife points to a small clay pillow near the children. Rubbed with oil, she says. Only a little. You look closer and smell it. A faint trace of cannabis, mingled with camphor and mint. So they sleep through the dogs, she adds, already dozing against the wall. You think back to the temple, to the incense and statues and sacred oils. And now here you are, same herb, same plant, in a space with no gods, just tired humans trying to soothe their joints and maybe their thoughts. There's something sacred in that too. The husband fans the coals just once, and the smoke brightens for a moment before fading. Outside, you hear a soft splash from a water jug refilling, a donkey shifting its weight, a late bird calling to no one in particular. You help fold the mats, wrap the remaining herbs, and tiptoe past the children. The door creaks as you leave, and the man smiles faintly. Tomorrow, he says, you'll feel your spine thank you. You nod, though you're not entirely sure which part of you feels better. It might be your spine, your breath, or just that thing behind your eyes that stops buzzing when the world finally hushes. Back outside, the air is cooler. You wrap your shawl tighter. The stars seem closer now, like they've been leaning in to listen to your journey. There's a quiet lesson you carry with you as you walk back through the winding lanes. That cannabis in Babylon wasn't just smoked in sacred ceremonies or rubbed on the knees of gods. It lived in the soft rituals of rest, in the bedtime teas, the poultices, the oils rubbed onto tired foreheads by mothers who had no time for formal prayers but a deep need for peace. It lived in households, in breath, in sleep. By now, you know the way, through the side alleys that twist like lazy rivers, past the shrines with flickering lamps and bowls of grain left out for no one in particular, past walls etched with stories in cuneiform, which you've stopped pretending to understand, though you like to pretend they're personal letters meant for you. Tonight, your destination is not a temple or a potter's home. It's the herbalist's shop. It doesn't look like much. Just a low stone building with a faded wooden awning and a hanging clay disc that wobbles slightly in the breeze. No sign, no welcome mat, just the faint smell of roots and sap and something you've come to recognize. Cannabis, drying in bundles above the doorway. Inside, it's dim but alive. Shelves carved from mudbrick hold jars sealed with wax. Bundles tied with reeds. Powders stored in little linen sacks. Some items you recognize, poppy heads, fennel seeds, myrrh resin. Others less so, twisted things. Bark that smells like burnt sugar. Petals that pulse faintly blue under the lamplight. The herbalist is a woman of maybe 40, though her eyes suggest she's lived at least twice that. Her hair is braided with tiny pieces of copper, and her fingers are stained with 100 past experiments. She doesn't greet you exactly, just hands you a stone cup and jerks her chin toward a corner mat. The drink is bitter, more so than usual, probably an infusion of cannabis and asafoetida, which smells like old garlic but does wonders for breathing and possibly repelling annoying spirits. The herbalist sits opposite you and begins sorting dried flowers into 2 piles, one for use, one for compost. You watch, eyes trailing the movement like a cat watching falling leaves. As the minutes pass, she begins to talk. She speaks of medicine, not just cures but balances. In Babylon, sickness isn't just physical. It's emotional, spiritual, cosmic even. A fever could mean anger in the liver or grief trapped in the lungs. Cannabis, she explains, was one of the few herbs that worked gently on all levels. Not strong, she says, tossing a dried stem into the reject pile, but faithful. Historians still argue whether Babylonian healers truly understood the psychoactive nature of cannabis, or if they simply appreciated its soothing effects. The texts, those scratched-out tablets dug from the sands, offer recipes but not always explanations. They mention oils and salves, compresses and smokes, but rarely intent. Still, it's clear the herb had a role beyond pain relief. The herbalist shows you a wax-sealed tablet. It's ancient, even by her standards. She unwraps it slowly, like a dessert saved for a particularly boring feast. On it, a recipe. Cannabis, thyme, goat's milk, and date syrup, meant to be taken at twilight for sleeplessness, sorrow, and hearing too many voices at once. She smiles. It works, she says, though the goat's milk gives me gas. You both laugh, and the sound is absurdly loud in this small, dry room. She lets you help prepare a few treatments. One is a balm for joint pain. Cannabis boiled with vinegar and beeswax, then stirred until smooth. Another is a paste for chest infections, mixed with honey, black cumin, and the tiniest pinch of crushed emerald. Expensive, yes, but the patients swear by it. Or at least they stop coughing long enough to compliment her pottery. You notice a small pot of oil on a high shelf, sealed tight, wrapped with red string. For temple dreams, she says, seeing your gaze. Priests use it when they need to see things, or stop seeing them. You don't ask to try it. Something about the way she said, see things, felt less like an invitation and more like a warning wrapped in silk. Instead, you ask how long she's worked with cannabis. She shrugs. Since I was small. My mother rubbed it into my scalp when I wouldn't sleep. My grandmother used to boil the seeds into candy. Too much makes your tongue lazy. You chuckle, partly because your tongue is already feeling a bit slow. She packs a small pouch for you. Sleep bag, she explains. Inside, dried cannabis leaves, a slice of fig wood, and 2 chamomile flowers. Put it under your pillow. You'll dream of rivers. Outside, the city hums differently. It's past midnight now. Even the cats look tired. You walk slowly, the pouch in your pocket, your limbs slightly rubbery. There's a story you remember, one the herbalist told between measuring spoons and muttered curses at her apprentice, about a scribe who drank too much cannabis wine and claimed to write faster than the wind. His tablet was unreadable, of course, but he swore it made perfect sense in the moment. You believe him. Sleep feels close now, draped around your shoulders like a second robe. The street lamps flicker, and every breeze carries a whisper, in ancient Babylon. The lines between science, magic, medicine, and dream were faint and forgiving. Cannabis didn't fit into a single box. It was remedy and ritual, sleep aid and sacred smoke, ground leaf and whispered metaphor. And here, in the back room of a tiny shop that smells like old tea and possibility, it's still all of those things. You're slower now. Not in a bad way, more like syrup sliding down a warm plate. The roads of Babylon feel quieter, as though even the cobblestones are nodding off. You've wandered through temples, kitchens, workshops, and sick rooms. And now, there's only one place left to visit before the city fades into full sleep. The archives, it's not the glamorous kind of archive. No grand hall, no marble columns, no ancient librarian with a majestic beard. This one is more humble, tucked behind a ziggurat and up a narrow stairway that insists on testing your knees to the top. You're met by a single oil lamp flickering next to a pile of tablets, clay-stained fingers, and the man who owns them both. He's a scribe, older than you'd think, yet somehow still younger than the tablets he works on. He gestures for you to sit on a low stool padded with papyrus scraps. You do, slowly. Your knees make a noise like a rusty hinge offering its resignation. He doesn't speak much. Scribis harelidu. But he pushes a tablet toward you. The writing's fresh, wet even. still soft in places. He's been translating older texts, ones nearly crumbled into dust, preserving fragments of knowledge about herbs, treatments, rituals, and cannabis. The tablet tells of a peculiar use. Cannabis paste rubbed on the soles of the feet during eclipses to walk unseen in shadow. He shrugs when you raise your brows. Might have just been a poetic way of saying don't panic. He mumbles. Historians still debate whether these kinds of entries reflect literal practice or metaphorical storytelling. But in Babylon, those lines are always murky. A plant can be medicine, myth, metaphor, and snack, all before breakfast. He shows you another. A legal text. Apparently, a merchant once tried to pass off poor quality cannabis seeds as spice of the gods. The case ended with him being forced to ingest his own mislabeled product, resulting in severe drowsiness and public snoring. According to the complaint, a harsh but strangely fitting punishment. The scribe chuckles. He deserved it. You wonder how many tablets exist like this, hidden under layers of more important events waiting to be noticed. Not the wars or royal decrees, but the small human stories. An apprentice who burned the wrong herb, a priest who forgot which statue he'd already anointed, a woman who whispered to her cannabis tea before drinking. He hands you one last piece, a fragment barely 2 inches across. On it, just 3 lines. Smoke softens the night, words fade into silence there. The plant remembers. You sit with it for a while. The scribe doesn't rush you. He keeps writing, his stylus tapping gently like a beetle on a drum. Eventually, he stands and stretches, offers you a pinch of something from a small pouch, cannabis resin mixed with crushed figs and a dusting of poppy. You taste it carefully. The sweetness lands first, then the warmth, then nothing but stillness. It's time to go. You descend the steps like a feather drifts. Slow, uncertain, willing to land wherever the wind decides. The city's almost entirely asleep. Even the ziggurat casts a sleepier shadow now. You hear the soft lap of water in the irrigation canals, the final bleats of a distant goat dreaming about something nonsensical, probably involving turnips. You've learned more than just facts tonight. You've felt the rhythm of a civilization that used cannabis not as a miracle cure, but as a thread woven gently through their lives. Not loud, not flashy, just present. In ointments, in incense, in drinks and in dreams. You remember the priest rubbing it on a statue, the potter adding it to a pillow, the herbalist blending it into a balm, and the scribe recording its subtleties in clay. The plant lives in all of them. And now, perhaps, in you too. You return to your own space wherever it is in this ancient dreaming city. You settle onto cool sheets. The pouch of sleep herb sits beside you like a talisman. You breathe in once, deeply, and everything slows. A door creaks shut in the distance. A dog sighs in its sleep. A star falls somewhere behind the clouds. You are ready now, for sleep, for dreams shaped like cuneiform, slow and deliberate and endless. And now, dear listener, we drift further from Babylon's moonlit streets. The oil lamps have flickered low. The incense has thinned into memory, and the last murmurs of sleepy conversation have curled themselves into the folds of your mind like a cat in warm sun. Let your thoughts settle as the city fades into stillness. The cool stone of ancient walls, the rustle of linen robes, the hush of smoke curling into a night sky older than anything you can name. All of it remains with you, distant but gentle, like footprints in wet clay. You've walked through temples and markets. You've tasted bitter tea and sacred paste. You've felt the weight of a scribe's tablet in your hands and the softness of a potter's pillow under your cheek. These moments may be centuries old, but here, in your slowing breath, they feel close, intimate, almost like your own. Let your body melt now, like warm resin in the coals. Let the world soften its corners. Let each sound blur into the next, until even the silence is humming. You are safe. You are still. And the stories, those old, quiet stories, will still be here when you wake. Good night. Sleep deeply.